Where did COVID-19 come from? At the moment, it raises more questions than clear answers.
The head of the FBI, in a brand new interview, is saying the agency thinks COVID may have originated, may have started with a lab leak in Wuhan, China.
For me, I went through the process myself, where I thought a lab origin was much more suspicious than now I realize it was.
The theory that the virus may have escaped from a lab in China has been a heated issue.
At the heart of this is this idea, and we can call it the Jon Stewart fallacy.
China, what do we do? Oh, you know who we could ask? The Wuhan novel respiratory coronavirus lab. The disease is the same name as the lab.
There actually is a lab in Wuhan that studies these viruses very extensively. But it turns out our own research has shown what I would describe as decisive evidence that this market was the site where this first started spreading and likely jumped from animals into humans.
Researchers now believe it's clear that the virus came from the Wuhan market and not the lab.
That's where the science is. The public perception is not there. And in part, it's because there's not that many people who've spent 10 to 16 hours a day for 4 years trying to integrate all of the information. And that's what you want to do as a scientist. You don't want to advocate for one hypothesis or against another hypothesis. You want to advocate for what the data actually tells you. Down to 50 nucleotides for the fragments, because this genome that we have in 100 nucleotide fragments, we need the reverse complement. But I am an evolutionary biologist, but my area of specialty is the evolution of viruses, and evolutionary tools like creating the family tree of viruses can help you answer questions like when, where, and how pandemics begin and spread around the world, how they could be prevented. But somewhere between the ancestor of the closest relatives in birds and cattle. HIV and influenza have been two of my major focuses. And so I've done work on HIV, working out how that pandemic started, including doing field work in the Congo to collect samples from chimpanzees who have related viruses. And then on the flu side, I developed a way of accounting for what we call local molecular clocks. So molecular clocks are a way that we can look at viruses that are collected over weeks, months, years. They evolve so quickly that you can see the mutations accumulate in real time. And it was sort of magic that you put that together and all of a sudden the confusing differences kind of snap into place. And in many ways, what I've done now with COVID is a direct parallel with that. Okay, so fast forward to early 2020. There are reports of this virus in people who have mysterious pneumonia in Wuhan, in China.
China has more than 200 confirmed cases of coronavirus, it's called, which produces pneumonia-like symptoms.
What I knew I wanted to do was take that outbreak and model it on my computer. We need to do these, what we call simulations. We need to rerun the tape of this epidemic and the evolution of the virus over and over and over again. And finally, we're able to use that same methodology to answer questions, not just about how this virus spread to different parts of the world, but how did it get into humans in the first place? Of the 174 earliest onset COVID cases that are known, there's an astonishingly clear signal of where they lived. Our most recent analyses show that if you take the center of those residential locations of the early cases, it's just at the entrance to a parking lot at the Hunan market. Of all the places in a city, 8,500 square kilometers. So unlike any pandemic in history, we have the addresses of these folks. It's incredible data. And then the genomic information strongly suggests that there wasn't just one jump of these viruses, that there are two early lineages. That's a scenario that makes perfect sense at a market, where you have sustained infections with animals. If you then are thinking, okay, someone got it at a lab and then brought it to the market, that's weird enough because there's 10,000 other places that the person could go, including their own workplace. But then you're saying, okay, it happened, and then it happened 2 weeks later. What we don't have is a sample from an animal at that market that had the virus. But we were able to show that if you look where the virus was found in what we call environmental samples, so this is just basically like a Q-tip that you swab on a doorknob or an animal cage or a floor, and then you see, is there SARS-CoV-2 in it? The real hotspot in the whole market was a particular stall that sold wildlife. And the Chinese group that collected those samples collected them in January of 2020, sequenced them, and had the data that, raccoon dogs were there, both lineages of the virus were there. We have an environmental sample literally from one of the cages in this stall, and it has the virus. We have a really good understanding of how this one happened, but there's almost no discussion of what are we going to do now, today, to stop animals that we know harbor potential pandemic pathogens from being sold in the heart of big cities.
China has started to reopen its wet markets.
The virus likely spilled over into humans there.
And so, sad, frustrating. But what do we have? We've demonstrated that what we call this genomic epidemiology is incredibly powerful. Millions and millions of the genome sequences of these viruses that helped us learn when a new variant was spreading, more than half of them were sequenced using, in part, technology developed in this lab. And so that's an example of how what we call basic research, you just want to answer a question, can then actually feed into tools that can make the world safer.
The world needs to know the origin of COVID-19 to prevent the next pandemic.
When I see a question that I want answered, I will find a way to answer that, whether it means going to the Congo or developing a new methodology or working with people who can help develop that. Holy smokes. I just want to find the answer, because that answer will help protect us from the next one.